This conference will now be recorded.
And next, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get started. So we named this hotel industry update, and then we brought in a subtitle there: "Has the recovery begun?" And so that's really the focus, and we're going to look at an update. We're going to go around the world. We'll start at a top level. We'll be looking at China, and then of course Asia. We'll briefly to look at Europe and US, just for some lessons to be learned there and some observations. Then we'll talk more about recovery in detail, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk about brainstorming as well. Now, one of the important things to keep in mind as we're looking at this data is, of course, the research opportunities that we have. So, you think about it, we'll be sharing a lot of data. Now, the data that we make that I'm sharing today, we can make that available to you for you to use in the classroom, but most importantly for you to use for academic research. So as we're looking at data tonight, things are going to come to your mind, and you're going to be, hey, wonder if, wonder what, how's this going to play out, and what's going to happen here, and what, there are going to be a lot of things like that. So definitely keep mental notes of those. We can talk about those at the end, and then we can, and I'll be glad to keep talking with you about that in the future. And the demand for data right now is at an all-time high because of all the opportunities for research. And so definitely keep that kind of thing in mind. Also, as I'm going through here, I may not, I may share a little bit of data on your area of the world, and you may be interested in some more. Don't hesitate to let me know. Follow up afterwards, shoot me an email. And oh, you see my email right there, shood@str.com. So don't hesitate to drop me an email if you'd like some more personalized data as well. So good. All right, that's sort of formalities. And let's go ahead and jump in. If could everybody mute, put themselves on mute? We're getting a little background noise. If everybody could put themselves on mute. All right, I think we up, not quite. Somebody, can everybody check, make sure you're on mute? Okay. Let's start at the world, and yeah, share this slide with. No, I didn't actually last time. Last time was 2 months ago. But this is where we were at the end of April. This is showing percentage of closed hotels around the world, and obviously that's one of the big stories in this particular event. A huge percentage of closed hotels. Now in April, actually Asia was improving at that point in time. Everywhere else in the world was actually going down, but Asia was actually higher in March and was actually getting better. So, Asia was close to 50% closed hotels, especially mainland China, and we were seeing that those numbers improve. So, a lot of closed hotels. Now let's look at this over time. This graph shows some of the major cities in the world, major countries in the world, and the closed hotels. And what we're showing here, the line graph showed the percent of rooms closed in the country. So you see at the very top, you see Spain. At the in March and April, almost all the hotels in Spain were closed. Now look at China. If you go back to February, we see a lot of hotels closed. Now keep in mind, these numbers are a percent of reporting rooms. So there's the numbers here are close. They're not perfect. The China rooms would be underestimated in this particular data. But the important thing to emphasize is as you look at going into June, we're at mid-June right now, heading towards July. most of those rooms closed are dramatically going down. We're going back to normal at this point in time. And China, the good news is in China, our indications now, almost all of the hotels that were closed in February are now reopened, and I think we estimate that at about 50%. As I said, these numbers are there's some variation in these numbers here, but now we're back to close to 95% of the rooms reopened. So great news in China for sure. Now, the other big story in this event is the number of restrictions, and these are showing government-enforced restrictions, sorry about the typo there, severe restrictions we saw in March and in April. And in April, you just started to see things opening up. Now, let's jump ahead one more month to May. By May, you saw a lot of these restrictions being lifted and hotels being okay to reopen. And now we jump up to mid-June, and very few red locations around the world. Almost everything is yellow or orange, and of course, in many areas, green. So good news, restrictions are being lifted. Now, when we looked at the end of May, here are actual occupancies at the end of May. You'll notice mainland China at 47%. Now, it's actually gotten better. This is end of May, so we'll see updated data in a minute. Europe at 16%. Now that was at a low, that was at 10%. North America is at 35%. At the low, that was in the around 22%. So a little bit of increase, between March and then April and then May. And now let's jump ahead to June, where we're at, and this data is based upon last week, so that's the week ending June 14th, so we're just talking a few days ago. Mainland China did pass the 50% mark, so that was a significant milestone. Europe surpassed the 20% milestone, so that's some significant recovery. And Europe had lagged there and was very slow, but in the last couple weeks, restrictions have lifted. And of course, North America surpassed the 40% milestone. So, all good news, but these are way off. These numbers are way off normal. We are not even close to back to normal, but we are certainly moving up from the lows that we had before. Notice Mideast is at 35%, a little less impacted there, but other areas, Asia at 27%, Australia and Oceania at 31%. Looking around the world at the different, and you see, just in 2 weeks, you see the improvement between May and mid-June. Now, this is one thing I mentioned, I showed very briefly to you last time we were together at base. These are, we joke about them being eyeball graphs, but it shows the number of worldwide submarkets. So these are small geographic locations, and the colors are categorized in buckets by the actual occupancy. Now, you could see when we're looking at, April, most of these submarkets were red, a very few, some were orange, very few above 50%. When we go from early April to mid-May, now we're looking at much more orange and, a fair amount of green around the, some green. And then when we jump up to June, we're looking at, we're beginning to see a fair number of submarkets going back to the 50 to 75%. These are the submarkets for the entire world. Now look at the difference. If you go to Asia, you're seeing Asia is actually responsible for a whole lot of the green. If you look at, the last eyeball there for June and compare that to what you see here, you see that Asia has a significant contribution to the markets that are above 50 to 75%. So that's where, obviously a lot of that is mainland China, where areas are beginning to recover. And just for the sake of interest, note these same graphs when it comes to Europe. As we said, Europe is much more slow when it comes to recovery at this point. So very little green in Europe. We're just beginning to come up. So the big news in Europe right there is that some submarkets are now at above the 25% level. So, but very few above the 50% level. So anyway, that's a little bit of a worldwide perspective. We're now going to jump into China, and we're going to look at data for, more specifically just for China. This compares China, and we're going to start with the blue line graph that you see there. Notice that and this is absolute occupancy. This is daily data, and this is a running 7-day number. Now, occupancy for China hit bottom the first week of February, and when it did, it was just below 10%. So you see that week of February 8th. And then you see in February and March, it slowly started to recover. It didn't really lag on the bottom, sort of like Europe did. Notice the purple line graph is Europe. We'll look at that in a minute. And that sort of got stuck at the bottom a little longer. China did gradually head up from the bottom, and has done that consistently throughout March, April, May, and then, as we mentioned, just last week, the week of June 13th, actually surpassed the 50% mark, and the actual occupancy last week, and it's a running 7 days, so it smoothed a little bit, did get to 52.6. Now that was actually, it was reassuring for China, because if you note, before last week, there was a little bit of a plateau for the last 3 weeks, and people were a little concerned that that the China performance might be sort of plateauing, and the good news is last week it did jump up. Now we'll have to continue to watch that over the next couple weeks to make sure it's still heads in a positive direction, but we're certainly hopeful that that's going to continue. Now that's China, so that's the blue line. If you notice, Europe was really the next one to head down. Europe started its decrease at the end of February and March, hit bottom sort of mid-March. You see the purple line, and it's been very slow to recover. Now, just in the last week, the good news for Europe is that it did surpass 20. It had not surpassed 20 before, and made it all the way up to 24.1. Mideast is the green line, and you can see that it headed down at about the same time Europe did, but never really made it down as far. You'll notice it made it down to the high 20s and has recovered a little bit, but you'll notice it did plateau within the last 6 weeks. It sort of plateaued, and actually last week it went down a bit from about 38 to down to about 30, or maybe 39, down to about 36.8. So I'm not positive about that. If you're interested in more information on the Mideast, drop me an email and I'll be glad to get you more. And finally, US. You can see the purple, or the red line hit bottom at the end of March, last week of March. The bottom for the U.S. was 22% and has trickled up to 42%. So it just last week surpassed 40. So that was positive news for the U.S. So anyway, that's sort of where we are. Looking at China, 52.6. Let's drill in and take a look at some more information. This was China before last week, and there was concern. The prior 3 weeks had shown some leveling off. The good news, that trend did not continue. We did break out of that trend and jump up to 52.6. So that was good news. Here, this graph shows occupancy of all the submarkets in mainland China. If you notice, the green is greater than 50%, and then we have shades of green and then shades of orange. As we went through this whole event, you can see very early on in February, we almost instantly turned from green to orange, very little change. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen on the opposite end, does it? Recovery takes some time. So you see the dark orange changing to a lighter shade, and then a lighter shade, and then it goes white almost, and then light green. But you notice by the end of May, where we're at here, we're almost up to green. Now, that, keep in mind though, that's greater than 50%, and you know, typical occupancies throughout China, you know, generally range from 50 to 70%. So good news is we're getting back to sub-normal, but we still have a ways to go. Now let's look at where we are when it comes to some of the prior year comparisons, and you know, this shows data for the last couple weeks, the last 5 weeks, and notice what we're doing is we are comparing mainland China to tier 1 cities. Now these are just tier 1 cities; these are not the new tier 1, but just the 4 big cities in China, and then we compare that to all the other cities. Now, what you'll notice is the tier 1 cities are lagging when it comes to recovery. They are lagging behind all the other cities in China. That's totally to be expected, big urban areas, and you know, so that's totally to be expected. If you look at the average of mainland China for the last couple weeks, the occupancy is about 25% lower than last year. But then when you look at that breakout, you see that the tier 1 cities are about 35% behind, and all the other cities are about 20%. So you see the distribution, but you also see the big contribution of the tier 1 cities. So, you know, we're heading in the right direction, but occupancy is way below what it was last year. This next graph shows the same thing for average daily rate, and you're going to see the same kind of thing for average daily rate. We're a little bit above the negative 20% bar there, and notice that the tier 1 cities are again just the same way. They're a little less than the other cities, and of course that's one of the big concerns. People are, you know, looking very closely at the average daily rate and how they're being impacted by this event, because that's, you know, that affects, of course, the profitability of the hotels for sure. I've shown you similar slides to this. This is just a different perspective. I like this. This is actually a contribution or a percent change related to RevPAR. And as you look at that, notice the mid-scale and economy hotels, when it comes to RevPAR, they're basically negative 50. So it's, you know, half what it was last year. So think about it. When you add up, you know, the ADR decrease and the occupancy decrease, obviously they both contribute to RevPAR. So mid-scale and economy hotels about 50% down from last year. Now look how that plays out by the other class groups, the other scale groups. Upper mid-scale negative 60, upscale negative 63, upper up negative 65, luxury negative 67. We know that in a situation like this, the higher end hotels are going to be more significantly impacted. Think about it. That's where the group business generally concentrates, and so it's totally understandable that those higher end hotels are going to be more significantly impacted. This shows RevPAR, and again, this is this is another one of these research opportunities. If anybody wants to drill down into this and look at the occupancy impact and the ADR impact by class or categories like this, great opportunity. You could study that. You could study that at, in big markets and smaller markets and all kinds of possibilities here. So that's definitely an interesting characteristic of recovery. Now, this is a similar look, and in this particular, the next slide I'm going to show you here, we show you different metrics for the tier 1 cities, and then the purple or the pink line is going to be the leisure destination. So we pick out some of the major leisure destinations, leisure markets throughout China. That'll be the pink line, and then the green is going to be provincial capitals. Now, these are some of the smaller cities, but heavy business concentration, and again, a real interesting thing to be watching over time. And of course, that's going to be one of the big drivers of the recovery as business demand comes back. So here we pick a group of representative cities in that category. Now let's take a look at the China data here as we see this. We're looking at, first let's look at the tier 1 cities. That's the black or dark blue line. You notice that those are lower, and they're slower to recover in this situation, and those tend to be a little more muted. Look at the pink line, the leisure destinations, and what do you notice here? First, you notice, and keep in mind, this is daily data that we're looking at. You notice, first of all, more ups and downs, and of course, that's the weekday versus weekend impact that we're seeing, and totally understandable that these leisure destinations, they're going to be seeing demand, and this is an occupancy graph, so they're going to be seeing increases in occupancy on the weekends. Look at some of the holidays. We label both of the recent holidays in here, and notice how these leisure destinations really peaked on some of those big holidays, but it's happening during the normal weeks as well, and you see the peaks during weekends. And then finally, look at the provincial capitals, and you're going to see a lot of these, these are getting close to the 50% mark. These business cities, notice, this is business demand that you're seeing here, and notice it's offset as far as it's weekday demand rather than weekend demand. Interesting set of data here, and just hopefully that gets you thinking about possibilities and differences here when we're talking about these areas bouncing back in recovery mode. Let's look at this one. This is showing some of the big cities. One of the things that we saw early on, Shanghai tended to be behind some of these other big cities, but notice as we continue from month to month to month, Shanghai, of course, a major tourism destination, is moving up, and it in May actually surpassed the other cities, and then again, a relatively positive sign as far as recovery mode is concerned. Let's drill down into some of these leisure markets, and this shows 2019 data. These leisure markets were on average in the range of 60% occupancy. You'll notice this year that wasn't even close. But now let's move ahead and look at recent data. So this is daily data for last week. Now that's what it was in 2019. And then that's what it is during the rest of the summer holidays. Now let's bring in 2020 data. For sure, you see, it's beginning to catch up. And when we get to the end of May, what do you notice? If we zoom in on that, we see, heck, that was almost a similar pattern here for that last weekend in May. Obviously, we have to watch to see what happens during the summer holidays, but the hope is that that pink line is going to be much closer to the line from last year, and that would be a great sign as far as these leisure markets are concerned. And that's, of course, one of the top areas as far as recovery is concerned. These leisure destinations come back quickest, and that's certainly a positive sign. This is interesting. This is Hong Kong data, closer to home for some of you, and you'll notice that the different lines here are the different submarkets in Hong Kong. You'll notice that the central districts are lower than the surrounding areas. That's to be expected. In any of these situations, as we're looking at data, the more urban locations, the more downtown areas are going to be more negatively impacted and slower to recover. You'll also notice the weekend trends here. When you look especially at the surrounding areas, you're looking at high peaks on the weekend. I think one of those was a holiday in there, and totally to be expected there. And that we're seeing that in Hong Kong in every area. Q had asked about this, and this just shares some pipeline data. One of the things that STR does is we do track pipeline data. Pipeline data would be hotels that are under construction, in planning, and we're seeing a large number of those projects being postponed now. And this one is tracking to later in the 2020 as opposed to 2021. So the key is we're seeing a lot of postponement, and we'll continue to track that over time to see how this is impacting projects that were in the pipeline. But that is to be expected. There was a fair amount of projects in the pipeline, both in China and Asia, and we'll certainly be seeing that over time. All right, let's move to Asia and take a look at other areas outside China. And we in the prior presentation, I showed you how the trends moved from China to Asia. What I want to do to this morning is really just bring you up to speed on some of the other areas. Some of the outliers in the countries in Asia. The Philippines occupancy has been relatively high, and there are certain reasons for that, government related, contract related, and but the Philippines occupancy has been relatively high. If you look at all the countries in Asia, it's been one of the highest, up around 50%. Now that's still below the averages last year, but it has been an outlier during this event. Singapore is another one that is very high. Now, some of that is understandable. The government has contracted with many hotels in Singapore and basically bought rooms related to quarantine, bought hotels, not just rooms. So the contract basically is for all the rooms. Well, when you look at that, the only way to report that is as if the hotel is full, and that has happened for a large enough number of hotels to bump the occupancy up. So it's unfortunately a distorted number, but it is the reason some of you have noticed that before, that Singapore is on the top there for countries in Asia. One of the positive signs is in Vietnam. We're seeing occupancies jumping up, especially on the weekends. We're going up to 20-25%. So a place that's heavily reliant upon tourism, we're beginning to see some of that tourism come back. South Korea, heavy increases, spikes on Saturday, and we've seen that all throughout March, April, and May, going into June. And the last weekend there was of course a holiday weekend, and got occupancy close to 50%. New Zealand, Australia, that's going to take a little bit of time. The flights, the restrictions, and so the areas like that are going to take some time to come back. We talked a little bit about the significant impact in India and Maldives and Sri Lanka. Let me know. We're getting ready to do a webinar next week, I think, on India and some of these other places. So don't hesitate to let me know, and I'll be glad to get you updates. In Indonesia, we're seeing better performance in Jakarta. I'll be glad to get you more on that, but Jakarta has been doing better, and this is a situation where a big city, sort of different than usual, a big city is actually doing better. Thailand, significant impact in Thailand. Things locked down, significantly, hotels closed. So you can see really hit bottom, got close to 0%, below 10% occupancy throughout Thailand. Malaysia, similar, many hotels closed, just beginning to reopen at this point in time as well. And as I said, if there are other places in Asia that you're interested in that I I've missed and haven't covered, don't hesitate to drop me an email, and I'll be glad to try to get you something in more detail related to an area that's of interest to you. We're going to spend a quick second in Europe just to show you what's going on there and how things are looking from a recovery point of view. This first graph shows the downturn in February and March, and it shows it by some of the major cities in Europe. And you'll see, of course, no surprise, Italy, we all saw, was impacted first, and it went down mid-February, a good several weeks before the rest of Europe, but it didn't take long. Most of the countries went down together shortly after that, about a 3-week time span, and all ended up near the bottom, and that was below 10% actual occupancy. The only outlier there a little bit was UK. Took a little longer to go down, did hit bottom, but then recovered relatively quick. London has had a lot of impact on the UK number, and the London occupancy never really went below 22, 23% in that big city. As well, some of the outlying areas were less impacted as well. If you'd like more UK data, don't hesitate to let me know. Most of the countries, though, in Europe, still below 20% occupancy. And here we put countries in different buckets, and you can see, look at the number in the 0 to 20 range. Most of the countries in that range. In 21 to 40, we see countries like France, Germany, and UK. So a very few in the 20% range, and that's based on data from just last week. This shows not countries but markets, and you see the markets over time. And the good news is that you see in the last 3 weeks, you do begin to see those markets heading back up. And but you notice for a good 8 weeks, those markets were all near the bottom in that 10% territory at the bottom. As of last week, this is worth mentioning. Look at the top 5 markets. You see no big cities in these top 5 markets, and it's just like we saw in China and Asia. You see outlying areas, smaller cities. The bottom 5, you see big cities like Lisbon, Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam. Those are the ones still at the bottom, and of course that's just what we're seeing in other areas of the world. Here are some cities for Southern Europe, And these are some of the big cities in Southern Europe. Look at the ones that I've highlighted there. Major cities, all significantly below 15% even. Milan, Madrid, Rome, just beginning to have those restrictions lifted and beginning to come out of things. And then for Western Europe, and this is actually Northern and Western Europe, you're seeing, many of the major cities still in the 0 to 20 bucket. And you'll see also as we do this, you'll see some of the international hubs versus the more domestic hubs. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's going to be another characteristic in the recovery, international versus domestic, and we'll talk more about that. So we're beginning to see some good signs throughout Europe. The one positive note about bookings in Denmark and Netherlands, another positive note about tourists seeing the Algarve as a COVID safe destination. But think about the Algarve, that's in Portugal, on the Mediterranean coast, a much more smaller destination. It's not the Riviera. It's a drive-to destination for places like Lisbon and Madrid, and again, those types of destinations are going to be the ones that people feel a little more confident going to, and that's definitely positive. Just some sample data for UK. These are some resort destinations, more tourism areas in UK. During May, we saw some big occupancy numbers in some of these, especially during the weekend, and especially 2 weekends in May were bank holidays, and we saw occupancies getting up above 90% in these tourism destinations. So that's similar to what we were seeing in Asia, first sign of that in the UK. Here we're beginning to see at the end of May, we had a holiday weekend, and look at some of the countries in Europe that had occupancies. Now, these weren't stellar occupancies. These were just going up to 30, 25, and 30%. But, when you just spent 3 months at 10%, that's a big improvement. And so we're beginning to see some very early green shoots in Europe. One last thing to share with you, this is some data in Spain. Interesting to compare Barcelona and Madrid, major urban markets, to Balearic Islands and Canary Islands. Now, this is business on the books. We track that as well, and these are reservations into July and August, and we're seeing forward occupancy in some of the more resort areas as 20 and 30%. And there again, think about the opportunity there for some of these island destinations, and think too that to get to some of these places, folks are taking ferries rather than airplanes, and is that does the tourist feel like a ferry is somehow safer than an airplane, and all kinds of possibilities there when it comes to research. Real quick look at the U.S. The U.S. last week, just on the weekend, got very close to 50%. You see, for the whole week, it was 42%, but more and more, we're going to be looking at weekday versus weekend, and then total week. So total week was 42, weekend was 48. That means weekday was less than 40, but they work together, and we'll see, weekend occupancy is going to be higher everywhere in the world. I showed you last time, I showed you a couple charts on that for China. So this is showing a RevPAR, and one of the things we look at closely is the decrease in RevPAR. The U.S. bottomed out at -84. It has crept up over the last 8 weeks to -62. So still well below normal, but creeping up. Now, this is interesting because what we do here is we compare the actual rooms sold in the US to the counts of travelers in the airports. TSA is the airport folks, and so we're counting the number of people who actually go through the TSA security checkpoints, and then compare that to the actual rooms sold in hotels for that same week. You'll notice, so the dark blue bar are the number of rooms sold in millions. The light blue bar are the number of tourists going through the airports, and again, that is in millions. But also notice the purple dots there are the ratio, and what we're seeing is the ratio is moving up. We'll be watching that more, but there we're correlating air traffic to the rooms sold. An interesting perspective, and just something I wanted to share to get you thinking about possibilities. Top markets last week in the US. If you look at these top markets, you'll recognize probably none of them. And think of it, the top markets, and this is the same for everywhere in the world. You don't see places like Miami or Orlando or New York or LA. What do you see? You see markets that many of you may have never heard of before, like Myrtle Beach and Knoxville, Tennessee. We joked a little bit about that last time we were in a webinar recently. So you're seeing smaller destinations, and some of these are beach destinations, but they're not huge popular areas. They're smaller, they're drive-to destinations, they're smaller locations where I'm going to be on a beach, but I'm not going to be mobbed by thousands of other people. It's going to be smaller, it's going to be less volume. I feel safer, and so that's the kind of thing we're seeing. I wanted to share this slide because it's important. One of the big trends here is the group business. In an event like this, group, and everybody is, of course, has experienced that probably personally. Conventions are canceled, meetings are postponed, everything is basically shut down. Now look at the top 25 markets in the US and the amount of group business that they had for April. You see most of these markets below 2% group business. Now, normally in these markets, it could range from 20 to 40%. That's, of course, that happens in a downturn like this. It happened in 2009. It takes a lot of time for that to come back, and that'll be something we're watching very closely. How quickly can that group business return? And that's going to be sort of and it's going to be critical as far as recovery is concerned for that group business to come back. And so that's something, and again, that's another research possibility. You can check, we can provide data for group versus transient. You can look at occupancy, the demand, the rooms sold, the ADR, and we saw very interesting things when we looked at the 2009 data as we were coming out of that situation, and we can do the same thing for this. Lots of possibilities. All right, that's a quick update. Let me finish up with some slides here related to recovery and sort of summarize what we're looking at here. First of all, we see a lot of positive signs from just from a virus point of view. Things are getting better. Active cases in areas are all going down, and so signs are definitely pointing in the right direction. And more signs, restrictions being lifted, things opening back up, definitely positive news. Government plans are becoming much clearer. These are, some restrictions in Europe that had end dates, and now we're getting to those end dates, and things are opening back up again. This was a real good check-in with CEOs. This was NYU did this, and it was a discussion with the major CEOs, getting their feedback, and most of them feeling that we'll be back in 2023. Back to 2019 RevPAR levels. That was the consensus of these CEOs. This was done at NYU, a virtual webinar with the major CEOs of hotel companies. So, and when you look back in history, you see the hotel industry has been through these types of situations. They always recover. The question, of course, is when. We know that this recovery is going to take some time. It's a definite significant situation. It's not going to bounce back quickly. It's going to be slow, and it will happen in stages, like we said before. We'll look at those stages in a minute. I have a slide that sort of breaks those stages down a little bit. The other thing to emphasize, there are going to be bumps along the way. We've seen that recently with some news, and so there's definitely going to be some bumps, and that's to be expected. Demand is likely to be depressed, and it's going to take time. This is when you look at the numbers, we see numbers that are much more significant than the 2009 downturn. The restrictions in some places are still there, and may be there for a while. The airline industry has been more impacted than any other time in history. They're still trying to figure out, they're still unveiling plans to go back to full capacity. It's going to take time, and demand will significantly be impacted. I mentioned stages before, and we talked a little bit about that when we were looking at data. We see already some domestic rebound in those drive-to destinations, and those are going to be the ones that are going to see business come back. We mentioned places like the luxury destinations or the resort destinations in China, smaller resorts in Europe, some of those examples of markets in the US, those drive-to local accessible type destinations are going to see bounce back in early stages. Leisure is going to happen in an early stage. The weekday, you're going to see weekend business. We saw everywhere that I showed you data, you saw spikes on the weekend. Now think of it, that's people like you and me who've been locked up in our homes for 3 or 4 months. When we finally have the ability to get out and have the confidence to do that, we're going to see that weekend business begin to rebound. I showed you hotel class variations, and that's going to be important. We're going to see, the lower end hotels rebounding, but you're going to begin to see some of those higher end hotels rebounding shortly. It's going to take a few more months, but then you'll see some of those other hotels rebounding. Now, the thing we'll be watching carefully as that happens is what happens to the average daily rate when the occupancy does recover. Will those luxury hotels significantly drop rate in order to get demand back? And that's something we'll be watching carefully. It will take time for the corporate business to come back, the group business to come back, and of course, international travel is key to this, and it's going to take some time for all of that to go back to normal. And that's why, that, like I said before, this is going to take some time, and it will be, it will eventually happen, but not super quickly. I showed you this recovery scenario last time we were together. Notice the drop, the red line, a bounce back, the green line, but then the purple there is the drag, and that's sort of what we're seeing, and it's not totally plateaued, but that drag period is going to take some time before as it slowly moves up and goes back to normal. As I said, one of the big things is going to be international travel, and the reliance upon domestic versus international travel. Some of the areas in Asia heavily reliant upon upon international travel, and that's going to, that's going to take time, and that's going to cause those markets to, to recover a little slower. There are a lot of risk factors. There's some certainly an uncertainty as we do forecasts. We do our forecasts with Tourism Economics. We released those just last week, some updated forecasts, and we're getting them out right now to our customers, and I'll be able to share them with y'all in the near future. But there's still a fair amount of uncertainty in that forecast. Travel restrictions, consumer confidence, international travel, and all of that goes in to that. This event could be more severe and take longer to recover than the 2009 event. We look at different scenarios when we work with tourism economics, a short-term, mid-term, long-term type scenario, and but there's certainly the possibility that this will take, a significant amount of time and recovery, as we said, in like 2023, 2024, in terms of getting back to 2019 RevPAR, where, demand will recover relatively quick, 2021. But keep in mind that that's not the only thing that has to recover. That there is, new supply that's coming on board. That's going to impact occupancy, and then ADR has to come back as well. And when both occupancy and ADR rebound, then RevPAR catches up. So it will take some time, and stay tuned. More of that forecast data will be released in the very near future. A couple resources to direct you to. The STR website does have a COVID-19 link on the homepage. You can go there and listen to webinars on a regular basis. Tomorrow, for example, there's a webinar on Australia and New Zealand, and you can go in and get detailed. The webinars that our folks are doing around the world are very detailed now. They're specific to certain areas. So stay tuned. Take a look at that, or drop me an email, and I'll be glad to try to keep you updated on that as well. Our sister company is hotelnewsnow.com. Great resource, a lot of articles, a lot of virus related articles on there as well. And of course, the SHARE Center is the program that I run, and that's our way we try to support universities around the world. We have hundreds of universities in Asia that are involved in this program. That's the program through which we make data available. Our data we provide for academic research and also for student projects. In addition to data, we also have resources for the classroom, like training programs that we make available for free to members of our program. Student certifications, the CHIA is a certification in hotel industry analytics. Many of the schools I noticed that are involved that are represented here on the webinar utilize the CHIA. We have a new CATA Advanced Analytics certification. Drop me an email if you'd like more information. We do competitions, student competitions. This year, for the first time, we're doing a virtual competition. Last year we did one in Hong Kong. We've done them in New York and London before, but this year in November, we're going to do a virtual competition so any school can participate. And we'll be glad to send you more information on that as well. So training programs, student certifications, and competitions. One of the things that schools are doing this year, and just a way we've determined we could help, is we're using some of the certifications to create a virtual internship experience for students. And that's really just trying to help schools. Many schools have found that their internships have been canceled and dried up. And so if you'd like more information, I'll be glad to send you information on how to create a virtual internship. It does require the school to have someone involved. So there has to be a faculty member that is going to facilitate that. But you know, it is possible to do a virtual internship where the student gains hands-on experience working with data and creating industry relevant projects. So drop me an email if you'd like more information. The generic email is here, sharecenter@str.com. My personal email is shood@str.com as well. So at this point in time, we're going to pause. We'll have some time for questions and answers. And in this question and answer period, definitely let's talk about research opportunities. And if you have an idea, you know, feel free to share it. And or if you're interested in different types of data that are available to perhaps support a research project that you're thinking about, don't hesitate to ask questions related to that. So I'm going to pause, stop talking, and stop sharing my screen. We'll go back to the webinar, and feel free if you have a question, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask that. And then I'll also, if you'd prefer to type it in the chat, I'll jump ahead and jump over to the chat and look at that as well. Q, you feel free to jump in as well and moderate if you'd like.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve, for this wonderful, very comprehensive presentation and introduction of the global status as right now. Actually, yeah, I saw from my chat top saying from Monica, and thank you, yes, Steve, for a great presentation. Given the slow recovery, how do you think this will affect the customer experience?
Well, that's a good question. Now, you know, I would think that it could have a very positive impact. Now, think about it. You're going to have hotels that are desperate to get those tourists, those guests back into your hotel. And you would think that they would go out of their way to make those first set of guests very welcome and to provide a very positive experience. I was talking with a couple of people and was saying, heck, if my hotel had been closed for a couple months, I would be, you know, working with my marketing department, you know, getting them primed and ready for those first customers that are coming back. You know, when they do come back, you know, we want marketing folks to be out there taking pictures, you know, taking videos, showing folks having a great time at my hotel, and getting them on the website, showing them being safe, but also enjoying the beach, enjoying the pool, and having a good experience. You would hope. Now, sometimes that's not necessarily exactly what happens, but certainly the opportunity would be there. The other interesting thing that I think you're going to see too is in some cases, you're going to see hotels that had been heavily reliant upon group business have to sort of reinvent themselves for the next year or more, because that group business is not going to just snap and come back immediately, and so they're going to have to reinvent themselves for the transient traveler, and there again, the opportunity would be for them to provide a very positive experience for that customer. And so definitely the opportunity is there, but Monica, that would be a great kind of thing to drill down into and to think about, you know, doing surveys for the, you know, in that area as far as customer experience is concerned after the virus. You know, what a neat opportunity that would be. Cool. And so I'd be glad to talk with you more about that.
Thank you, Steve. I think the next question is about the role of the school in the training in such a special time.
Yeah, I know, and some of you could probably speak to this better than me. But you know, I've heard different situations where schools were getting involved and trying to provide training. Obviously, one of the big issues is safety, and you know, I've heard situations where schools were helping there with technology. You know, in terms of reinventing the kitchen and the restaurant type facilities. So I've heard stories of that. That's not my firsthand experience. If there's anybody else on the call that would like to speak to that or share some of the things, some of the unique things that you might be doing or stories you might have heard, feel free.
Sure, yeah, I can add some stories I heard now. I think you need to look from the two sides. Uh, if the school are looking for profit driven, or if they are really still charging a lot to train the industry partners, now probably is not a good time, because clearly we all heard about the every company or independent hotels, they are cutting the all kind of expenses and costs, including the training. But on the other hand, I heard that some of the schools are actually using this opportunity to strengthen the partnership with the industry partners, with the hotel organizations, by providing more creative training. And some of the hotels I heard used to pay the schools for training. Now they cannot really, or they do not have the budget to pay, but they are giving out different other benefits, most directly the room vouchers, for example, right? But there are other schools are not even expecting to receive the income or the fee from the hotels, by using this as an opportunity to work more closely with the hotel industry. So I think it all depends on how the schools look, what they want to get out from this training sessions or these opportunities.
Yeah, from a bigger picture point of view, you also have the opportunity for schools to help, you know, look at some of this data and help hotels sort of navigate the next months and years of this recovery cycle. And you know, I think that's one of the things we try to do. You know, we provide our data to all the hotel companies, and we meet frequently with the strategic heads of these hotel companies to do that. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing together in October. We're after the APacCHRIE conference, which I know you all have on your calendars. Hong Kong Poly is also hosting an industry event called Impact 2020, which will have industry folks, and it'll be a great opportunity to bridge the gap between industry and academia, talk about problems, talk about insights, share data and perspectives, look back at past situations. There are a lot of comparisons that you can make and lessons to be learned and industry takeaways that you can pull out of that. And so if you're interested in that type of analysis, and don't hesitate to drop me an email. I'll be glad to brainstorm with you.
Yeah, that's great. And the Hong Kong Polytechnic University is also very much welcoming everybody to join either one or both of the conferences. Yeah, we'll have, as Steve mentioned, we have the APacCHRIE conference, probably is more focused on the academic side, and then immediately back to back to that APacCHRIE conference will be the industry oriented. We call it Impact. I think that is the great name for this year's theme. We'll have still have a lot of opportunities to interact and to discuss more about the details. But hopefully between now and then, yeah, we will get more updates from you and to say more positive signs about this industry.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about October is going to be a great time in history to see. At that point in time, you know, we should be, you know, significantly in recovery mode, and by October we're going to, you know, definitely have a better feel as far as the slope of that recovery, and then better be able to predict the endpoint and or the the return to normal or return to 2019 is what everybody's sort of trying to estimate at this point in time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions? So we still have 65 participants.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure
Hello,
can.
Steve
Yes.
and Dr. Qu. Okay, I would like to ask you one question. Sorry, before that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Razi from University Technology Mara, Malaysia. So I would like to know about, you have presented just now on the occupancy rate, because nowadays we cannot really rely on the occupancy. Even though the occupancy has picked up, but somehow when we talk about the revenue management, especially when the occupancy has reduced, at the same time, the hotel nowadays cannot rely so much on the online travel agency. And I'm not sure whether in the future, in order to maintain the average daily rate, maybe the hotel has to go directly to the travelers. And do you have any take about this issue? So how would be the future business model for the hotel, especially during this 1 year post-pandemic? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, because during the prior downturn, the the OTAs were relatively, had a relatively high degree of success. Some of that, I think, was related to the desperation of the hotels to fill rooms. And during that period, the hotel industry gave up a fair amount of control of, of that ability to manage revenue. And so that was an unfortunate side result, and different people are going to feel differently about that. But some hoteliers were going to say, oh, that's a unfortunate side effect of the prior downturn. Now, if you think about it, in recent years, as things peaked and were doing very well, the hotel industry gained a fair amount of that control back. You saw, we went back to, there used to be rate parity, heavy reliance now, on loyalty. And so hotels basically got some of that control back, but that'll be an interesting thing to watch. It's a great thought, and will those kind of things be compromised again? OTAs, there's percentages that they get versus the hotel get. What's going to happen to those percentages over time? The whole idea, you brought up the topic of revenue management, and one of my big questions during this time, I think in 2009 and 10, you saw, think about it, especially the big hotels frequently have systems that handle the revenue management. In 2009 and 10, I think there was a lot of overriding, a lot of user control, and they were basically making their own decisions. The question now is, at this point in time, with the increased effectiveness of these revenue management systems, will the hotels rely a little bit more upon that, and will they do a better job during this particular event than in prior situations? One would certainly hope so, but we'll have to look. That's why everybody's really looking so carefully at the average daily rate in these situations, and for different types of hotels, and so it's a great question. Another great research opportunity as well.
Yeah, okay. Regarding that matter, okay, because I'd like to know how can STR SHARE Center can help us, especially the school, for example, like what mentioned by Dr. Xiao just now. Because we, as the school, our hospitality and tourism school, what we want to do now is trying to gauge more data for us to do simulation. For example, we can do in the future business simulation by taking more inputs, more variables So nowadays we can see the business vulnerabilities, and we cannot project the similar event. We cannot use the previous events. So maybe if STR SHARE Center can provide a unique trend or unique data that we can use in the simulation, because what I feel, what we can do, what we can instill in the student is how to use the simulation and how to analyze data. So now what that's lacking in this crunch time. Thank you.
Yes, feel free to drop me an email, and I'll be glad to tell you more about how we do that. How we work with schools to help, and the data. You're right. When you look, in these situations, you can go back and look at data from a prior economic cycle and learn incredible lessons that you can apply to the one we're in. You go back to 2009, you go back to 2001 in different areas. There are other times that you can go back to. As far as simulation is concerned, we work with a few simulation companies. I'll be glad to get you more information on on simulation type games that you can use in the classroom as well. They are, we work together with them. We have training programs that help you build a foundation and all the analytic know-how that your students need in order to do that. And so feel free to drop me an email, and I'll be glad to bring you up to speed on that. Yeah, that's a real good question, Siska. And that's basically what I was trying to say about, Siska is asking about the city hotels. Those downtown urban hotels are really going to have to work hard in order to get those guests coming back. There's a confidence level that's going to be of a challenge that they're going to have to overcome. And that's what I was saying. If I was a GM of one of those hotels, I would have had my marketing department doing videos of my hotel. I'd show videos of staff cleaning every inch of that hotel on a regular basis, and making sure that the customer feels confident that they're going to be well taken care of. Things to do in the hotel, being able to have a good experience, socially distanced, but still having a positive experience. That's the challenge for those urban hotels. Of course, they have to get there. If they get there, they could use, are they going to need to use public transportation? How are they going to get there? So trying to figure out all those angles. If you're one of those types of hotels, that's the challenge that you're going to face right now. And, how are you going to get that customer confident that they're going to have a safe and enjoyable experience is the challenge. So, and when you do get them back, have your marketing folks out there taking videos of them having a good time, interview them. Hey, let them speak to, get the testimonials and let them speak to their positive, safe experience for sure. Another thing related to that is that I was looking at today is group meeting and events and how that's going to change over time, and that's another thing that people need to be thinking about. That's a great way for a great opportunity for us as educators to be preparing our students as well. Meeting and events are going to be the nature of meeting events is changing. And so we really need to brainstorm on, what have we learned during this particular situation? If events in the future will definitely be combination face-to-face and virtual, and how is that all going to work out? And how can we prepare our students to be able to handle that and help their their employers of the future be able to do that in a very effective manner. Definitely an opportunity.
Yes, definitely. They're great.
Any other questions? Any research ideas that you guys may have? Any ideas that you want to talk about or throw out? We have a smaller group here, so feel free to get personal if you'd like.
Yes, please. Steve, can I ask you a question when others might be still thinking? You mentioned, you showed us statistics about China had a kind of like reached a new norm. It's around 50% occupancy level for a couple of weeks. So it's no more growth, at least for several weeks already. But that is based on, you mentioned earlier that it's kind of like more than 20% below what the industry used to be, at least like in the last year. I do think this trend, because China is among the very earliest country, start recovering.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that below 20% would be something many other countries or the whole industry will be look at in the next few months when we compare, even where in the China, it's a kind of like, how to say, describe this, the situation, it's the virus is gone, but it's still under pretty tight control. So people are doing, middle level of travel, not minimum, but definitely not, as people are traveling as much as they want. But looks like this will remain for a while. How do you think the other countries will follow the similar pattern, at least in the next? Yes, please.
I think we're going to see that, Q, and I think the concern about China was that the last 3 weeks had sort of plateaued and had reached an occupancy, and it was below 50%, but it was close. Yes. I think people were delighted to see the week, just last week did go over 50%. So, but I think if you remember that recovery scenario where it dropped, recovered a little bit, and then sort of plateaued before it came back to normal. Now, keep in mind, there's still no group business. There are no conventions. There's no meetings. So that is, a big missing component of when you're looking at demand. We'll begin to see that come back. A small group could take 90 to 180 days to, plan it, and then before it actually happens. A bigger group could take, a year or even more before you, when you go from the planning stage where you make arrangements till the time where you actually see it happen. So, that's going to be part of that lag time and the potential plateau that we're seeing. But I think the hope is during that plateau that we see small steps of growth as there's more transient business, more business travelers, individual business travelers coming back and, calling on customers and doing, small events. So, but, I think there'll definitely be some of that. And I think that's going to be a characteristic we'll see everywhere in the world. It's just a matter of how long will that take, and will there be small steps during the time?
Yeah, exactly. I think all those information you presented as same as from the last time. A lot of people actually asked about the recovery profile and basically the projection of STR about let me say you look at 4 stages, right? The down stage looks like most of the countries already hit the bottom, and we are all in the bouncing back stage. But the slide it showed us is around October, which very interesting will be our 2 conferences time. Hopefully we will reach the point the industry is changing from the bouncing back to the drag. For the drag period, it will be about more than half a year. Right. I think the industry and then also us will be most curious about when that drag level will be like occupancy wise will be for example, for China will be 55%, 60%, and for US looks like it should be higher, but whether the US market will be able to come back to that, to reach that point in within this year. Clearly, I didn't know that the NYU webinar results. It looks like the CEOs are kind of all agreed it will take us at least more than 2 years to recover to the 2019 level. But then it means that whole recovery, or the what do you call as the drag period, will be pretty long actually. And I think the industry need to be prepared for that. It's not like 2 or 3 months, right? We might looking at the annual KPIs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not just a couple months, and it's going to take a lot longer than that, and that's important for hotels to understand, and for them to prepare for, and it's definitely going to take some time, and hotels need to prepare that way. As I said, like if I'm a meeting and convention hotel, if I rely heavily upon that type of business, I need to reinvent things. I may need to come up with weekend packages that I never needed to have before. But I've got to have that to sustain business and to get that transient traveler in, and to keep me keep my hotel above water until the group business does come back.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I have question
Please.
to both of you, Dr. Xiao and Steve. Okay, because you thought just now you presented about the market. Okay, let's say we have 3 different markets. Maybe you can have a case study in the future. You can share with us the performance of these 3 markets. For example, we have big countries like China, and then that can focus or emphasize on the domestic market. For example, the countries like Hong Kong or Singapore, where they cannot really rely on the domestic market, so they have to rely on international market. When the international market is closed, so that means the performance will definitely go down. And one more thing is the country like archipelago, something like the countries like Indonesia, like the Philippines, because traveling is also permitted by using airlines. So now we have 3 different case studies, and maybe Dr. Xiao can also reflect in this question because you are from Hong Kong, right? And one more thing, because of this pandemic, we can see that the objective of the business is slightly deviate. For example, nowadays we cannot really look on the return on investment, maybe profit maximizations. So they have to go to the different mode, survivability, or maybe for the digital footprint. So how can they not only emphasize but also monetize the visual market? We talk about the hybrid event in the future. Just now you mentioned about they have to change, they have to shift in focus. Maybe look on the not only the weekdays market, also weekend market. But now, if let's say you hold an event, so you can only have, let's say, maximum number of 100 per event. But now, how can you focus on this other segment, virtual market, which you can tap on bigger scale? So I think we can have many case studies that we can discuss by using the data that you have provided, Steve. But what are your opinions about this? Both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the cool possibilities as far as research is concerned. As tragic as this event is, and significant it is for our industry, it does open the door for a lot of cool things that you can study. And you brought up a number of great ideas in your comments there, but comparing markets in Asia, the reliance of the markets, and I have some fairly good data on that reliance of the markets on international travel. And then seeing how they rebound. I mean, that's going to be, significant. They're still talking about some of these markets not opening up at all. So, if you have a market like New Zealand that doesn't open up at all, then the only people staying in New Zealand hotels are New Zealand, New Zealand citizens. And talk about having to reinvent yourself. That's that's a definite situation where those hotels are going to be, catering to a totally different set of guests. So lots of opportunities, and what you mentioned there, the ability of comparing these different markets, or even, comparing, doing a more detailed comparison where you're looking at specific hotels. And, to take an event like this, it would be very easy to survey, the hotels in a market or in a country related to something like digital marketing, and find out which hotels have done, which practices is related to something like digital marketing, and then correlate that to performance. And that's where we step in, and we can say, hey, you get 100 or couple hundred hotels responding to your survey. You then analyze the results of that survey. Will help you correlate that to the actual performance of those hotels to see, hey, you might be able to find that hotels that had, really innovative initiatives related to digital marketing then tended to outperform hotels that did not do those types of innovative practices, and so lots of opportunities in a situation like this, and a lot of cool things to learn and lessons to bring away from something like this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, I can share with you. I'm right now. I'm already working with one of my friends, Nan Hua from University of Central Florida, and the we proposed research actually was just recently funded by my school. We are doing exactly on that direction by trying to find out what the hotels has been doing, more new approaches. But my background is strategies. I mean, more look at the strategic directions, the strategy part of things hotels are doing, and then we want to use that information then to compare with the performance data which we hope to get from STR, and then to say what are those new innovations, new practices adopted by the hotels over the time. Does that really make a difference on financial performance, but also could be on what you just mentioned, like market mix. Right? Because the hotels are all trying to change. There's no doubt. Okay, the hotels not want to change. I think it already despaired, or they will despair very soon. So it's only a matter of how to change. So I think as academics, we can do a lot of research. We can focus on only on the marketing side, or on the HR side, or on the F&B side, or on a broader perspective. But ultimately, it's try to identify those very helpful practices and strategies and innovations.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the idea as far as revenue management practices, and that would be a great kind of survey you could do in a situation like this to find out hotels that, how heavily did you rely upon your revenue management system? First of all, find hotels that have sophisticated revenue management systems in place to give them direction. Then the next question would be, how heavily did you rely upon what the revenue management system told you to do, and how many situations did you override it? Did you look at, what your competitor was doing? And obviously in a situation like this, sometimes people look at their dumbest competitor and say, geez, I've got to do the same thing I got to do the same dumb thing they're doing, or I'm going to lose business. And if you did that, then you overrode what the revenue management system was telling you what to do and did something different. Then what happened. All of you have seen the research on discounting, and when you discount, it takes, for every dollar you go down, it takes a long time to get that dollar back. And, so the same thing's going to hold true in this situation for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, other than that, yesterday, Hilton announced a layoff of 21,000 people, right? It's I just saw the news headline, and then I cannot help myself to thinking how this affect. Of course, Hilton has a lot of hotels, but still, when we come down to the property level, the Hilton must have done the math. Okay, but STR, I understand, whenever share information on a specific company or specific, particular hotel or particular companies. But as a researcher, probably this is something we can also look at. From the data we can get from STR, I know you have the income statement P&L, which shows the labor cost, and then how does that had been in the past few months, and how the hotels might have done something with staffing, whether it really helps. I'm sure in the short term it helps with the bottom line, but how such staffing issues affect other things like moral staff satisfaction or the customer experience, like early on one of our participants mentioned about customer experience, right? But if the employees are too much heavily impacted, then the better experience will be very difficult to deliver. So that we are all related. So for us, we can choose any angle, any perspective to do a little bit more sophisticated research and say how these things would affect hotels financially and then non-financially.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great points, Q.
Thank you. Sure.
Well, good, folks.
Yes.
Any questions about classroom, training, certifications, anything, any ways we can help there?
Hello, Dr. Xiao and Steve. Can you hear my voice over there?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm just really curious for our this morning discussion, because what I've got so far is that in each of the countries, especially here we are in Indonesia. Yeah, I'm coming from one of a college in Indonesia named Batam Tourism Polytechnic, and we always do lots of research, because telling you that as Indonesia is a part of an archipelago country, that each of the island have a different characteristics and have different problems in facing this pandemic. So telling you one data about our island, that we are in Batam, we have 60% of a local brand hotel with only 40% international brand. And actually, currently now, lots of local hotel in Batam, they face a very hard issues, not only for having a very low income because of this pandemic, but also from setting the brand again after the pandemic. Because we already know that if the international brand, they will not have any job again to market their products, because they have already had a great name all over the world. But the problem comes up when it's the local brand hotel. And the greatest news has also come up lately that on the June 19th, Singapore has opened all the transportation and also all the roads for the people to visit. And we in Batam, we are only 30 minutes from Singapore. So what I'm just thinking now is that how this local domestic hotel needs to rebranding again their quality, instead of only showing that they do a lot of cleaning and setting the good hygiene and sanitation, because this is actually a very great issues that they have faced currently now here in our city. So what do you think, Stephen, Dr. Xiao? Because it's two different atmosphere, right? Hong Kong, we already know that lots of industry, lots of great industries are in there. But this has not happened actually in another part of the world. So thank you so much.
Yeah, great opportunity there. I mean, that's really cool. And you know, draw me an email. I'll be glad to try to, first of all, I can share with you the hotels in your area that we're getting data from, just to see how representative that is. And then it would be easy to look at that specific area to other areas in Indonesia and compare that, you know, find out, it sounds like your area is especially close to Singapore, and we can see, you know, is that going to experience a different set of metrics and demand recovery than other areas? You know, will Bataan see, you know, how will that compare to Bali, and how will that compare to, you know, other areas as well? So I'd love to spend time with you on that.
Thank you.
Yes, just one thing I want to add to Steve just mentioned. I'm not sure if you have worked CISCA, right? If you worked with STR data before, but STR, the beauty of the STR data is that you can identify a certain, you know, similar markets like yours. It doesn't have to be, could be in your country and could be outside of your country. But your market is a little bit, it's kind of like special, okay, relying on international, but it's very close, right? It's more than like, it's pretty much like drive within a driving distance. But there are many other.
Oops, Q.
Okay, so dealing with the markets in Batam, mostly as we tend to rely on the visit of international tourists. So lots of the local hotels that stay in Batam, they have a very great income for having the international tourists coming instead of the domestic one. So I think this is also deals with people's character in here. So, because lots of domestic, they just choose to have not to visit the hotel, but likely like a mass tourism site, maybe like a recreation or something. But less of them are enjoying the service of a hotel. So that's why when the government said that, okay, it's time for us to increase the domestic visit. So it's just kind of a very huge problem also for these 60% hotels that coming with a local brand. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, and that, you know, that'll pose a real interesting scenario in that situation. And you know, it'd be definitely something interesting to look at. Q, you went in and out. We lost you for a little bit. We lost your volume. I don't know if your connection, if we dropped your connection or what happened. It may have just been me, but I was replying back to Siska, and you were saying the same thing. You know, your special scenario sounds very interesting. It'd be great to research that over the next couple months to see how that to see what happens there, and you might be able to get some data in terms of travel data to relate to that. I know I was talking to people about some island destinations, and they were going to try to get ferry data and see if they could correlate the ferry data to, you know, to airline arrivals, and then correlate that to hotel demand as well. And so yeah, definitely an interesting thing to look at, and things that we could you know, find some interesting observations from.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yes, we are 11:40. We're running over time as always. It's pretty late for you, Steve. Okay, folks, do you have any other burning questions you would like to ask Steve? If not, I think we should call this webinar, and thank you very much for coming. I'm sure we will be working with Steve again, APacCHRIE, and then many other occasions to learn from STR data and all those updates. Yes, Steve, would you like to say the last words with the participants?
No, just great spending the time with you here. Don't hesitate to reach out if there's any way we can help you. And I look forward to seeing many of you in person in Hong Kong at APacCHRIE conference in October. Thank you all.
Absolutely, me too. Thank you very much, Steve.
Sorry, I do have one question. May I ask?
Sure.
Sure, yes.
So how can we have an online internship?
The virtual internship, basically what we're doing for schools is we're helping them facilitate that. Now, a school has to assign a faculty member to work with the students. Are you a professor or are you a student?
Teacher.
You're a teacher. Okay. Okay. So basically, what we're doing is we're helping the schools create a virtual internship experience. Now, the students are not actually working in a hotel or they're not working in a restaurant, but what we're doing is they would be working on industry relevant research projects. So we can help you, a teacher, provide some training to the students doing the internship, showing them different types of research projects that they can do. Then you would work with the student to create a project, one or more projects. We would then provide all the data for you, and then the student would do that research. So we have all the training available, online training, videos. So they would teach your student how to do a research project. Together, you could decide what exactly they would do. Some schools are doing more than one. Then once you decide on what they're going to be researching, we'll provide the data that they need for that. And then they would get hands-on experience working with that data, analyzing it, and then creating a presentation. Now, the project could be something like a market study. It could be an event impact analysis. It could be an economic analysis. It could be a feasibility study. Our training covers multiple projects that they could do. You would then decide one to do with them. The time involved could be, very small, like a week or two, or it could be very long, like, a month or two. So feel free to drop me an email. I'll send you more information about that, and then we could talk a little bit more if you're interested in a program like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Steve. Again,
Great,
thank you
folks.
everybody for participating. Thank you.
Okay,
All the
bye-bye.
best. Take care.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's lunchtime here in Hong Kong, the bedtime for you, Steve. Okay.
You enjoyed it, as always. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
next week.
Absolutely. Always my
Take
pleasure.
care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.